reason for that is, I don't know if, I'm sure that your fathers or your grandfathers, I would say to them, well, what did you do in the war? Yeah. And he never, they would never say, I don't know, they didn't want to talk about it. So I thought, right, well, I'm going to find out what he did in the war. So I've been studying a lot of history and documents, and what I want to go through with you today is just the amount of support that those armies got when they went to D-Day, went through to France on D-Day, and then the support they got as they went through Europe. So what I'm going to talk a bit about myself, but that won't take long. Some key timelines, because a lot of people here will have done history at school, but now they don't teach these sort of things. And then a little bit about this 164 formation, which I'm going to tell you what it is in a minute, and the training and mobilisation. This company was formed of railway people, railway men. And then a bit about their operations in support of the 21st Army Group, a little bit about logistics. They actually supplied, in the 11 months to the end of the war, they were supplied with over 50 million tons of stores, the American and British armies, which is quite amazing when you think about it. And then I'm going to just talk about the logistics for a couple of operations, big military operations in Europe, and then just a final couple of slides about the Detmold Railway, which was the military railway training place in Germany, and then a bit about the end of it. So I've never been in the military, but I've been on the railway since '64, and I'm still batting for the PWI, the permanent way institution as it is today, of course. And I do a lot of training and development of courses. So I did attend, up there on the right, you can see the Royal Engineers annual dinner for the transportation group. It finished in about 2002, basically because they all died or were getting very old and couldn't get there. But these were all officers in the Royal Engineers in the war, basically. That's me starting off in my drawing office, where we have boards and T-squares and all those things, and all surveying and doing out straight lines, and I learned a lot in there. That was the engineering. Look, you can see the drag lines. We were using drag lines then, believe it or not. And one of my first jobs, when I thought I was getting a bit beyond the boy, was to set up the smashing of the nuclear flash test. I don't know if anybody remembers that, but we tried to. They dropped it from about 1,000 feet into the ground, and then took about 4 weeks to get it out, and that never disrupted it. And then we ran the train into it 100 miles an hour, and that didn't flinch at all. So, and then later on, Nottingham was the leaders of laser dosing, and we're still using that today, of course, with some smart technology. Got on to as development engineer with Carillion. We're looking at vacuum systems, and I've been working on this. This picture on it is a Dutch railway inspection suite, and that's 20 odd years ago. But they've been into virtual inspection systems for a long time. We're talking about Insight. They've had a system called Aura. So that was me up until I retired in 2006, and then I went across to New Zealand and did a bit of work over there. So a bit of a potted history. 3rd of September, war was declared. Germany invaded Poland, and then, of course, we had what was called the we had an expedition to Norway, and then we had the Phoney War and then all of a sudden we were attacked by the Germans in France, and the Dunkirk was early June 1940, and then in 1942, which is not up there, they started to plan Operation Overlord. As soon as the Americans were in, the Americans wanted to invade France in 43. The British wouldn't do it. They said they weren't ready. And in early 1944, they finalised the transportation plan because they're going to put several million people into Europe, and they needed to provide the supplies. And of course, part of that plan was before D-Day was to smash up every railway that we could think of in France. Yeah. To stop the Germans reinforcing after D-Day. And then, of course, we then had to rebuild it all. And if anybody wants to have an interesting read, then Christian Walmar's got a book called The Liberation Line, which is a very, very interesting book about the American transportation groups. So D-Day, 6th of June 1944, and very, very shortly after D-Day, the first British, on D-Day there was Royal Engineers supporting the combat troops, but very shortly after that, the American transportation battalions and the British and Canadian Royal Engineers started to go over to Arromanches to start building the railways. And then the war ends in Europe, 8th of May 1945, and the 164 Railway Operating Company, which is what this is about, they started in July 42, after the draft plan for Overlord had been produced, and the 164 were all railwaymen, and they were started off in 42 and were demobilised in 46. So what was this 164? Right. It's a railway operating company. It's a company that can totally run a railway. Yeah, they can't build the track, but what they can do is they can operate the trains. They've got there's all the signalmen. They can drive the trains. Yeah, they can manage the operation of the trains, and these are just some of the various skills that were in there. And really, from this is the company's 343 guys there, and that chap in the middle is my dad. He was a long-term Royal Engineer. He started as a sapper in 1921, and by 1942 he was a major in command of that. So there they are. They're all railwaymen, and they did a lot of, from 42 up till 43. There was a number of these operating companies, and they were switching people about to try and get the right balance. Because, for instance, in there are dockyard crane operators. Yeah, so it was the railway operating companies. They took time and they settled them down. So what did they actually do then? So they formed in 42, and they were fully mobilised. Mobilisation means that they're ready for war, basically. So they had that 42 and into 43, getting the right blend of people, and they were November 42. They were working on the Melbourne Military Railway, which is near Derby. If anybody's ever been to Derby, yeah, it was the old Derby to Ashby route, and that became a training ground. So they used to run trains up there, but the Royal Engineers companies were totally in charge of it. And it was number two training. The number one training camp was at Longmoor, which is in Hampshire, and number two was this Melbourne. And what it shows that from December 1942, part of the company at Melbourne, and there are 10 other detachments at other locations, they pulled in all these people from the Big Four as it was then, and then the Big Four were short. So what they did is they sent detachments out to the Big Four, and so that was to help the operations out. But they were multi-skilling the guys as well. So if they were drivers, yeah, they also could. They could also be shunters. They could be signalmen. So it was quite a good idea. And 42. So training. The other thing I was going to show you, I'll show you on the next slide. Melbourne Military Railway is about 10 miles from, or where it was based, is about 10 miles from Derby. Anybody been to the Derby training centre at all? Yeah. It was 1943 London Midland and Scottish Railway, and it was taken over by the Royal Engineers in the Second World War. One of the things I thought was quite nice is that they did a Saturday night. They operated the trains right into Derby, and on a Saturday night they took the sappers into Derby, and there's a lovely article which says they always came back quicker than they went. Wonder why? Probably had a few beers. But here's the Derby Conference Centre, and you can see around here. Can you see the railway? Bassett Loat Railway, and these are the signal boxes. Look, so that's where they were training the blockmen, as they called them then. Yeah. Into and you can see on this bottom left hand, it's a Bassett Loat train set, and there was one. Yeah, Bassett Loat. Do you remember the name? That name? There was a train. There was an English signalling system on this one. British on this one, and then the one at Longmoor had a French, so they had to be trained in the signalling systems of all the countries. In fact, when they were in France, they were also trained for Belgium. It's all slightly different, you know. Might be in the EU, but they all do things differently. So all this training, rail cranes. I'll just pick a few out there. Driving various locos. I mean, there was 2,000 locos sent to Europe as part of that, invasion. Not all at the same time, I might add. But they've also got a number of diesels in that 2,000. And of course, the American 280s, 210 steam trains our people didn't know about those and had to go and learn them. There's a hell of a lot of learning went on. So a lot of training went on there. And then in 1943, you can start to see, I don't know if you can read this, but this is turning railwaymen into soldiers. And of course, you get all the usual foot drill, they were marching up and down, I expect, with a sergeant major with his thing behind there, but they're starting to this is the first one, weapons training, and you can see all the various bits, and sometimes they even had a beer at night. And then the second week, so there's 3 weeks of really hard slogging for the railwaymen into becoming soldiers, and just picking some out. Sectional attack, the British way and purpose. I don't quite know what that means, but I presume they thought, well, they're going to go to Europe. We just want to be British about this chap. But pillbox clearing, I mean, you wouldn't get that at training these days, would you? So there was really extensive map reading, selection of lines of advance. So they obviously thought that these guys would get into some sort of action. And then the last week, they all went out in bivouacs and slummed it and dug pits and all sorts of things. Knots and hitches, look at that, yeah. Did you ever do a knots and hitches course? I never did. So that you know, they've trained in them all these 3 solid weeks in 1943, training them to be soldiers. Then, of course, you've got to make the unit fit for active service. And as I said to you before, July 42 up until 43, lots of switching around of people. They wanted to get all these railway companies as balanced as they could do. And there was 10 days, although 15 days of mobilisation. And at the end of it, apart from some stores that weren't there, then they were ready to go. So why 43? Because there was talk about in 43 invading, and Winston Churchill didn't want to do it. He said, "We're not ready. We haven't got enough landing craft." And eventually, the American General Marshall was talked into not to leaving it until 1944. So, what happened then in June? What happened on D-Day? Well, D-Day, there was 5 beaches. The Canadians and British took 3 of those beaches. The Americans took to, sure you've heard of Omaha Beach, Killingfield that was. And the aim was to move forward to capture Caen on day 1. Caen's about 15 miles away from Arromanches, and they wanted to do that as a pivotal central area, and they failed by about 3 miles to get in there, and that caused a lot of problems because the British and Americans were trapped into this. They called it the Normandy salient, where the Germans brought down. I mean, they'll always say to you, you'll always hear, "Oh well, the Brits didn't manage to break through," but they had 5 Panzer divisions, facing them, and the Americans had 1. And eventually, they broke out. So the 164 was ready to go 2 days after D-Day, and then they were kept back because there was no railway to run on. There was no point in having them there, and they actually went across. In September. Oh wait, I better go the other way. No, I'm going the wrong way now. Now what's happening? I'm going the wrong way.
No.
I'm pressing the wrong one altogether. It's all right. When you get to long age, you get a bit funny with these things. So anyway, what happened then? Well, they were based, obviously, Longmoor for a start, and then the south of England was just full of military camps, absolutely full. And just south of Reading was Stanbury Camp near Spencer's Wood, and that was there. They were there for about 4 months before they actually moved. And then they went down to Assembly Area A14, which is just at the back of Portsmouth there. They moved across in September down into France, and their first HQ was at this little French village, which is just on the eastern side of Caen. They then moved up just into Antwerp, and I'm going to talk a lot about Antwerp. That was a pretty tough place to be. They moved to Tilburg in Holland in December 45, and then came back into Wuppertal in Germany, where they've got the. Have anybody been to Wuppertal? They've got the hanging railway there. It's very good. So that's their moves. And the 26th of I'll just show you this next one. So that's A14. They came down to South Parade Pier at Portsmouth. South Parade Pier, they built 6 more piers by the side of South Parade Pier, and they were bringing. They took them across in three of these landing craft, which I don't think was it. It was landing craft infantry. They spent 10 hours on that boat. I bet they were pretty sick of that. And they were landed in Aramonch. In anybody been to Aramonch? Lovely place to go to if you've not been. And you can still see the Mulberry Harbour. Have you heard of the Mulberry Harbour?
Yeah.
Designed by a Royal Engineer, and built. Most of it was built in Scotland, and then it was all towed across and put down in Aramonch. In fact, there were 2. There was one for the Americans, which was built on Utah Beach, and one for the Brits. And of course, after about 4 or 5 weeks, they had a major storm, and that wrecked the American one. The reason that they landed in Normandy is because they knew that they needed a port, and the only way all the ports were very heavily defended around France, and they thought, well, we better take our own port with us, which I thought was pretty smart. So that's them across. It took 10 hours, and when they got there, now this is what if you're exploring your history of your fathers, grandfathers, or whatever it might be, these war diaries are kept by all the operational units of the army, and we've got ship's logs and we've got RAF logs as well. So when they got there, they slept in a field the first night, and they were based in this little place called Magny, whatever it is, just to the east side of Caen. And what they had over there was lines of communication. They had identified railway lines that they were going to use. They knew that the Brits were going to break out in this direction here, and the Yanks were going to, sorry about that, the Americans were going to swing round and come through to Paris. So the Canadians and British were always going to take that line up through the north of France, Belgium, and Holland. And you can see that little area there. Well, when they broke out, then this was the 2 lines of communication, Argenton and Lisieux, where they were started to run the trains. So these companies, these 2 field companies, railway operating companies, had a workshop company, number 206, and that was based at Caen. Now the workshop company, I've got the records of that. It's amazing that they worked out how many screws, slabs of steel, bolts, and everything else that they would need. Everybody had made like a forward inventory of what they thought they needed of all of these groups. So the interesting thing is that, yes, there's 2 operating companies. 181 went a little bit before 164, but you see down here they've got controllers, controlling they've got movement sensors, like a bit like our control sensors. It was very well thought out, and the officers primarily came out of these 2 and were like shift controllers here. So the railway operating groups had two railway operating companies and 1 workshop company, and these 2 railway operating companies moved up to moved all the way through Northern Europe. So what do we got? So we've got the 21st Army Group, Field Marshal Montgomery. I'm sure that you've heard of him. uh, fell out with the Americans all the time, but he'd been in the First World War, he'd been beaten in France, and he said, I know how to be beaten and I'm not going to be beaten. He didn't want to kill it. He'd been in that First World War and saw all those guys mowed down and on the Somme, and he said, I'm not going to have that. I'm going to try and take my time and try and flatten the Germans before we go up. So you've got 1.2 million soldiers in there. The debt that we owe the Canadians is fantastic, really. I mean, there are only 20 odd million of them now, I think, but I mean, they were tenacious. So we got a British army and a Canadian army. We got the Czechs. There was Polish divisions, and even the Americans were part of that northern push. So the ports and the transportation system had to provide everything for those armies, 1.2 million. And I think the Americans got to over 3 million. And of course, we hadn't got a port. Yeah, we hadn't got a port until Cherbourg, which was on that tip of Normandy there, was taken by the Americans. And that was devastated by the Germans because they blew everything up. So they took there was a small port called Corseille in the Corseille in the salient, and they used that. And in fact, they bought the first 4 diesel locomotives were actually bought across on a landing craft, and then they were put in a vehicle like a trailer. And that was built by Bolton and Paul, who actually built some of the fighter planes, and they trundled them across, took them to the railhead, and they were the first 4 locos that they used of the 2,000 altogether. But road at the start was the way that they moved the materials through. But rail became instrumental in that movement, and is supported by the American, British, and Canadian units, which I'll show you a bit in a minute. And the supplies. I mean, you imagine 1.2 million people going up there. They need a few bullets a day. Yeah, they need a lot of rations, and they need a lot of ammunition. So we'll see the trains in a minute. So infrastructure, vehicle damage was expected. You can see that's just a picture. Caen was the major motive power depot, and they just destroyed it, and they booby trapped it all. So when these Royal Engineers went in there, there was a lot of injuries. Pretty crafty, those Germans. So what did we get then? So we got three groups of guys managing the railway, and if we like the British Army, were railway groups we've just seen, railway operating companies, but they got railway construction companies. Now what their job was to rebuild the railway. The bridging and construction groups rebuilt that railway, and you'll see how quickly they did it in a minute. It's quite amazing, really. They also had railway survey companies, and they had dock companies, because when they did manage to take out the big ports like Cherbourg and Antwerp, as we'll see in a minute, you need special. So they split them into special companies there. The Americans had 4 railway operating battalions, and each was based around one of their railways, the Atchison, Topeka, and all that sort of thing. They did everything. They did everything in their battalions rather than splitting up as the British did. But if you look at the Liberation Line, Christian Walmart, Patton said to them, I need 40 wagons of diesel and he pointed to a spot, and it was 135 miles away. Yeah, I'm going to be there in 4 days, and I want them trains there in 4 days. And they rebuilt 135 miles of track. They rebuilt 11 bridges. Yeah, and it got 30 odd trains in 3 days. I mean, fantastic. And they've got 17,000 men on that. So we could probably relay from here to Newport in a day or two. Incredible. The Canadians were asked by the British War Office to replicate the railway operating companies, and also, so number one railway operating company was formed in Canada and sent to the UK, and number two was actually taken from Canadian servicemen that were already in the UK. The telegraph company and a railway workshop company. You can see that's a picture of the Canadians, and there's their signalling guy up, because at the end of the day, all of these groups from whatever army could operate a railway without any signals if they had to do. Yeah, they were trained to actually operate. But and the other thing, of course, the Canadians were some of the best fighters that we'd actually got over there, from what I've read. So that's the organisation. So damage and reconstruction affected logistics. Don't forget, we'd pasted everything with heavy bombers and the French resistance before D-Day, because we were trying to stop them bringing reinforcements up, and then we had to put it back together. And you can see in this picture here, there was two ways that the Germans managed to take the track up. One was to put a big hook in it and just pull it along with a loco, which just split everything out. And the other one is they've got like a spreader, really, and it just sheared off all the fastenings, and they did a lot of damage. And of course, all the bridges were blown up. But it's interesting if you read some of the British RAF and American, the French resistance actually did a lot more damage on structures than we did. We were quite often dropped our bombs into towns and villages that were actually near the railway. But anyway, that's mine. Okay, so there was a lot of work on rebuilding everything, basically. That's what I'm saying. These are in the Imperial War Museum. They've got pictures of 181 Railway Operating Company. They just come in at the back of the invasion of Arromanches. The first line they opened was from Corsair up to Bayeux, and then Bayeux to Caen was the next bit. And you can see that's an American diesel, and they're all standing on there to make sure that the track is all right. And you can see here, this one down here is the number one bridge built by the RE Bridging Unit. Every bridge that they built, there is records of them, pictures in Chatham. So Wickham, anybody remember a Wickham rail car at all? Many years ago in Africa, I saw quite a lot of them. So that basically had to rebuild the bridges, rebuild the track, and then do proving runs ready for the big supply of stores. So okay, on the where was it? Right. Okay. So here's the 5 beaches. This is this was the original pocket. We talked about Corsair there up to Bayeux. That was the first bit of railway opened. And of course, we were trapped in there until, I'll get my date right, until the end of July. Then, of course, General Patton and Cobra broke through to the south, and we eventually managed to break our way through these Panzer divisions that were around us here. And of course, doing this, we created this Falaise Gap, and a lot of Germans were massacred, basically. But the big spring was this one here. So these are the Guards Armoured Division and the 1st Armoured Division came out of there like a rocket and very quickly got up to Antwerp. They bridged the Rhine. They bridged a load of other. But at Antwerp, unfortunately, they ran out of fuel. If they'd have kept going at that rate, they'd have been in Berlin in another couple of weeks. But if you can imagine, these are advancing, 100 miles a day. You've got the Germans retreating, and our stores are down here, and we're trying to feed them with ammunition and fuel, and they just run out of steam when they got to Antwerp. But it was a pretty outstanding. Those 2 armoured divisions did very well. So 7 days it took them. They were in Antwerp. So a little bit now, a bit about how the logistics work, because I talked a bit about giving you a bit of background. So everything had to be bought up. Got to get from the Channel. Remember that they'd spent best part of 2 years building up all these supplies of ammunition and spare tanks, bridging units, you name it. And they've got to get it. They've got to get it in the early parts of after D-Day, across that Channel and up to the advancing Allies. And you'll see that this is what Eisenhower said. He said, "Look, no army or navy was ever supported so generously or so well. So the planning that went into the all the stores and supplies was absolutely fantastic." So how did it all work? Okay, well, I'll try and give you a bit of a. Here's the army moving forwards, yeah, and they put in like a daily. Oh, I need this, whatever it is, and it came back to the rear maintenance. And now there was a load of dumps. So first of all, we've got all of these rear maintenance areas with all the dumps around it. Ammunition, food, tanks, etc., etc., etc. And the message came back to the rear maintenance area, I need some, whatever it might be. And then they were supplied from a depot or a dump up into a marshalling yard or several marshalling yards, where they were put into what was called pack train. And the pack train then went and delivered the stores really to the forward maintenance area or railhead. Usually then from that forward area, they were sent out by lorry to the army or the corps. But so this was coming down here. Now, build-up control in UK was making sure that these were all fed all the time. Yeah. If something went out of this, it was just replaced. So that's how, and then they got movement control centres run by some of the officers in 164 and 181, because they needed to get the stores up. They needed to get the empties back. They needed to get ambulance trains back. The Great Western provided a lot of ambulance trains that went over there, I might add. So there's a lot of traffic running, and it's all synchronised to ensure that those frontline troops have got what they wanted. Any questions, feel free to ask them, but got a lot to say yet. But anyway, the lines of communication were split up between British and the Americans. So the lines that they were going to take, when I say lines of communication, the lines that they can't open all the railways, they've got to get certain lines open. That's where they take priority. And they stretch right from the rear maintenance area up to the forward. And of course, as they advanced, what you've got then is here's your rear maintenance areas here, and as they advanced up through Europe, then they created forward maintenance areas. They're just storage areas, and every day those trains were flying up there or trying to fly up there and bringing back the empties. It's quite interesting. You can see that where the main lines were, sort of coming up through here, up to Brussels. Brussels to Antwerp was key. Antwerp, and then we'll look at where it went from there. And the other thing they were doing was they were bringing back in the French, Belgium, and Dutch railway people to assist. But of course, a lot of them had disappeared, and as soon as they could, they brought back in the local railway staff to help. But it was always under military control. Although the French tried, I think, in about the first few days to take it back, but couldn't actually do it. Number 10 and 11 are interesting for what I'm going to talk about in a minute. Number 10's up here. Yeah. And oh, that's good, isn't it? I like that. How do I get it back?
Oh, you go.
Oh, look at that. Technology is a wonderful thing. So as they were moving forward, they were setting up these forward bases, and they were the bases. The forward bases were actually just behind big battles. Anybody heard of a bridge too far? Yeah. Well, a bridge too far, as you know, was Arnhem, but actually they did. Gosh, what was the name of that place they got to? The Americans captured one of them. Got find my glasses, I'll be able to tell you. What's the name? Is it Eindhoven? What was that first place that the Americans took the bridge?
Nijmegen?
Nijmegen? Nijmegen, yeah. Well done, Andy. How did you know that? Spot on, man. Yeah. So they were set up to support and move forward as the army moved forward. Come on, right, that's better. Why's that not winding up? Is it because I fiddled with it?
Possibly.
What's happening there?
You need to shrink it back to the original size. That's it.
Yeah, we're away. Well done, Andy. Let's have a look at the supply then. 2,000 locos and 20,000 wagons shipped to Europe. About 900 or so from UK. Made it Crewe and probably Derby and all the loco works. And rail became the dominant supply mover after Cherbourg and Antwerp ports opened, because Cherbourg was pretty quickly opened by the Americans, but Antwerp port was not opened until November 1944, and of course the diesel was sent under the Pluto. Have you seen that? They unwound a big pipe across and then connected that all the way up through Europe. There's a lot of fuel, but it shows you there how the split. So by May 1945, they were taking about 30 to 35,000 tons of supplies a day up to the front. So the trucks basically used to take from the forward maintenance areas to the combat troops. But you can see there how much was actually moved by railway. It was fantastic. So a little bit about Antwerp. Antwerp in Belgium. Anybody been there? What a nice place to go to. When the Guards divisions got to Antwerp, they could not smash their way through and gain the bridges over the River Scheldt. So as you can see, it lays at the bottom of the Scheldt estuary, and the Germans, as they were being pushed back, they had a group of soldiers here, and they were put some defensive lines up on the north bank, and they also mined the estuary. So it was pretty difficult, and obviously the Allies wanted to get this because it's a massive port, and they couldn't get in there until they cleared Beaverland and Volscian up there on the north side. Then, of course, just as the British and Canadians were about to attack those Germans, the German Ardennes offensive took place, and Montgomery had to turn some of the army around to stem that. So it was the attack through Antwerp onto that north side was a little bit delayed. And you can see on there, managing the port was split between the British, between 164 and the Americans. It's a really big port, and I'll go through the size of it in a minute. So the battle to open the port of Antwerp took the best part of over a month, and there was a really high death toll for that. You can see the Germans went across from here and were eventually cleared, and the commandos, British commandos, stormed the big defences on Walcheren Island there, and eventually in November it was cleared. But that didn't mean that the boats could get in there, because they've got to mine sweep the thing clear. So it was a pretty horrific battle, that. Maybe I'm going the wrong way now. I'll try and get in a minute. I'll get it right. So the good thing about it was that the British Guards and the Canadian Guards had got there and had stopped the Germans completely wrecking the port. But it was a big port. It could take 100,000 tons, could be unloaded per day. And the British and the Americans set a target of 40,000 tons per day. And when the minesweeper had cleared it, then they started unloading. That's an American Liberty ship. That's 10,000 tons, and the fastest one of those built was 7 days. Can you imagine 7 days to build a 10,000 ton ship? And they built it. They built them in sections, just whacked them together. And about 30 years ago, I was on the line in Kent from I don't know, Ramsgate, Dover or something, I can't remember. And they've got 30-foot rails in. And those 30-foot rails came as ballast on the Liberty ship to stop them rolling over. I don't think they were too good for that. But those ships were, obviously, when this was open, they could bring stores straight in from America. as well as bringing it across from Europe. And you can see there, it was absolutely pummeled with V1s and V2s, which are the German wonder weapons. V1s were well, I'll show you pictures of those in a minute. But they had to put there was 500 anti-aircraft guns around this because it's quite near up to Germany. Yeah, we're in Belgium, and they were just firing V1s and V2s. Well, you couldn't shoot a V2; it was a supersonic rocket, but the V1 travelled at about 400 miles an hour, and they ringed it. And the Germans were quite clever. They'd fire them from there and then fire them from there. That means the anti-aircraft screens had to be moved across, and had a lot of problems. And you can see there, in December, there was 311,000 tons taken to the Americans themselves. So 29th of November, the battle was over on the 11th of November, 29th of November, first ship in, and then, boy, did they start to come in. You can see 164 were there between November 44 and March 45. And these are the numbers here of V1s and V2s that were striking Antwerp. And if you look at the war records, there was an awful lot of people killed. And this picture on the right is the V2 strike that killed the most people. That was a cinema, and the bomb V2 landed right in front of it, and it blew the front in. And the only thing my dad ever told me was that he'd got 3 guys sitting at the front of that, and they were killed outright. The blast just killed them outright. They didn't get hit with anything. And you can see that there were 567 casualties, soldiers and civilians, on that one strike. Can you see these blues and reds here, blacks? These are the positions of the rocket strikes into Antwerp, and over 6,000 were fired at Antwerp. There's far more than were fired at the United Kingdom. Yeah, amazingly enough. So it wasn't very pleasant in there. If you read the war diaries, it says V2 hit this and V1 hit that, and a number of fuel trains were hit, and some of his guys were actually given bravery awards for splitting them up and pulling them apart, or otherwise the whole lot would have gone on. So not a happy time, I don't think, Antwerp. Now this is saying this 3 men of unit were killed in that cinema, and another 3 men were killed here. It said V1 landed near Dock Station, killed 3 men of this unit. Corporals North, Sergeant somebody other, another sapper Wood. So, you know, it's perhaps why he didn't, I know he didn't like, obviously, losing any of his men, but, you know, I just wonder whether or not he'd had to write those letters to the, you know, to the wives and mothers. Not good. But every day virtually there's a V1 or a V2 struck that thing, and they kept going, and they didn't stop right throughout it. That they were working. The tracks were damaged. That's railway construction number 6, repairing the bomb damaged track, and we put out 45,600 tons in 1 week in February, and this was immediately prior to the attack on the first attack into Germany, basically. I'll show you in a minute. So you can see the state of that bridge, and the bridging companies and the construction companies built 174 bridges in 11 months. Now, I think that's pretty good going, don't you? In 11 months, 174 bridges. And they weren't small. Some of these were multi-span. That doesn't include the bridges built by the combat engineers who were with the divisions. These are the railway, to get the railway working, 174 bridges. And in the Royal Engineers Museum at Chatham, you've got all of the every one of these is charted and dated, and I sent you a copy, didn't I, Andy?
You did, yes. It's absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, it is. So just to talk about, well, this is the River Maas. So if you're driving up, you've got the Maas, and then you've got the Rhine. And the Rhine, of course, was getting across. That was the big one. The combat engineers built this Bailey pontoon bridge, which was the longest one ever built, 1,222 meters, in about a day under fire. Yeah, so that must have been a bit of a harrowing thing. But the old railway bridge was this thing here. Look, can you see the damage? And that was converted into a road bridge. The first thing was they wanted to get the road working, and then they built a railway bridge by the side of it. There's a lot of work done at this place called Geneep. Getting across bridges, across rivers, was a big issue in Northern Europe because they all ran into the sea there. So that's bridge number 82 over the River Maas, and you can see Bailey construction. There was a Lieutenant Colonel Bailey who designed these bridges. Every 6 men could lift the sections and bolt them together. They were designed for 6 men, and then they used to push them in with bulldozers and have cranes to lift up one end. It was all. I don't think we'd get away with that now in our health and safety at work. So this one is another picture of bridging the. Make sure I get the right. There we go. The story behind this is here's my dad, and here's all the engineers, and this guy here was a hydraulics engineer in Holland, and he came and joined the bridging unit because they needed to know the Maas is a river that fluctuates quite a lot, like the Severn, and they needed to know how high they had to build that bridge to ensure that it wasn't swept away. And that guy there, his name was what's his name? Roel Dekker. He hid the maps that they'd got from the Germans, and when the Germans had gone, he found them. So he's a very brave bloke, a very knowledgeable bloke, and he actually stopped with the bridging units whilst they were doing all the bridges in Holland. So just some of the logistics for the key battles. So there was 2. Nijmegen, right. That's where they got to. They were trying to get to Arnhem, but they decided to try and get onto the River Rhine, and the British were going to attack through what we called Operation Veritable, and the Americans were going to come up from the south towards the Rhine. The Rhine is just over here. We're going to come up, and I think they called that Blockbuster or Grenade. That was it, Grenade. Now the Germans. So this attack here was very difficult. The British and Canadians came through a forest called the Reichswald, which was very difficult to breach. But the point was that they wanted to link up at Wesel, because that is where the British eventually crossed the Rhine. So Operation Veritable and Grenade. Operation Veritable, there was 446 trains sent up to that forward maintenance area. And you can see the amount of tonnage. There was 1,054 guns positioned overnight before the attack. And the rounds of ammunition just for the first, this is just for the first broadside, if you like, was amazing. The general who was in charge of that worked out that the ammunition that was supplied for that attack would have been 32 miles long and 5.5 feet high. That's a lot of ammunition, yeah. So they were taking that up on the trains. Now, very difficult through the Reichswald forest. The Germans are getting desperate because it's getting very close to Germany, and we lost 8,000. One of the things that the Germans did before this grenade was launched was that they flooded. There's a river down here, and they flooded it, and that put the Americans back a bit, about 4 or 5 days. And this enabled the Germans to stiffen the resistance up here. So there was a pretty bloody battle there. So this is before plunder. There was 54 British trains. This is 4 days. 54 British trains direct from Antwerp to the roadhead with 27,000 tons on it. And then on top of that, there was 104 British and American trains went through Antwerp to the side. You can see the amount of logistics they actually needed. Oops, I'm wrong again. So when they were crossing the Rhine with Operation Plunder, the Americans crossed at Remagen. You ever seen that film? Can't remember what they called it now, but they managed to capture a bridge. But Operation Plunder was the Montgomery's attack across Wesel, across into the North German plains. And these this was the tonnage of that was sent up to Number 10 Army Roadhead, and that was not including movement of troops. But I mean, 60,000 tons of ammunition. They crossed the Rhine with an airborne attack, and they then. Well, I think the guards went across, and they'd absolutely flattened the north bank of that river where they attacked. They decimated the German defences and managed to get the bridges across, and away they went. So there's the logistical supply. You can see 54 million tons were sent to that the 21st and the 3 American armies that were in there, and Antwerp was the major difference. And if you look at that list there, you probably can't see, but the amount, that's a comparison of the amount of stores and supplies produced for the 21st Army Group. And you can see the Germans were all struggling. They couldn't get the, well, of course, they'd lost a lot of their fuel capacity then, but they never got enough supplies. So be it from from D-Day onwards, I mean, with 22 million tons in the for the British and Canadian armies, just about a tenth of that was actually provided to the Germans. And you can see that having a look down there, I mean, it's quite true. Sustained high tempo supply, and the Germans were just pulverised by the Air Force and mainly by the Air Force, of course. They moved to Tilburg. They took over Holland 164, and you can see the full list of detachments. They put them out in groups of 6, 7, 8 people. They were supporting the Dutch railways, and they got them out 1, 2. There's about 20 sites there. They weren't all together. They were out there helping. And one of the guys who was he was riding on the plane was shot by a strafing run of a German. So that was it. We're coming towards the end of the war now, but they very quickly. So we've split those detachments up, and just for plunder. I thought I'd gone the wrong way again. And then before they actually got across the Maas, the Germans were coming through and blowing up the railways. So they did have to fire their rifles once or twice. It says enemy patrols crossed Maas and destroyed part of the line of communication near O's. Repairs were carried out, and after test trains had been run, line was again open to traffic after 6 hours delay. So there was just no time for delay. That's it. This is the rail map, part of Holland. So you can see this is where Veritable was launched, and this line up here from Antwerp through Hertogenbosch, that was very important. When they got into Operation Plunder, which was crossing the Rhine, then this became the forward supply area, and that bridge, bugger. Yeah, I'm nearly there too. There we are. Yeah, this bridge at Genete that I was just showing you, this one up here, they started to bring the supplies through to this forward maintenance area under that, and up to Nijmegen. So this forward area, which is that red one there, they were taking something like 30 freight trains a day of 60 wagons. Yeah, were going up there every day, and they were bringing back the empties. And at times you have to have that flow of wagons, of course. It's got to come back as well as go up. So in the May 1945, they opened Detmold Military Railway, which was a German long walk for military training. And my dad's there. They were getting them all ready for the general to come along. And that's all had to be smart. Probably didn't want to be smart, but they liked it. So this was a military railway, a bit like Longmoor, a bit like the Melbourne one I talked about, where they trained them how to run it. And that's a little bit about, well, when it was split up into zones, then the 164 were based at Helmstedt and in Berlin. And they used to accompany the trains through the Soviet sector to get them through. And eventually they were demobilised in 1946. I think it's quite good to say that really, without that logistics supply, it did really support that victory. The role of the engineers transportation group was critical. 164 formed from railwaymen, turned into soldiers, and multi-skilled at that, and took initiative, and we owe a great debt to them. So that's my dad. That's this little guy here with a red circle around him is Sergeant Jones, a fellow researcher who contacted me when I was doing this. That was her grandfather, and the guy on the right was a Sergeant Digby, and he actually opened up the Cairn workshops and got them going because, as I say, they were devastated by the Germans, and he got a commemoration. And that's it, really. Yeah. 164. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you.
Any questions?
I hope you found it interesting.
Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah.
Ask Andy how quickly they could build it. Don't know it.
How they developed it is well thought out, well planned. Yeah. When I read a book, planning for Overlord was.
Anything online, James?
You have a Norman in it?
I don't know how we get out of this, but.
One question then. Yes, what effect did the Battle of the Bulge through the Ardennes have?
Well, it had a big effect because it didn't affect the logistical supply up to Antwerp, but they had to turn 21st Army Group down to attack the northern part of the Bulge, and of course Patton turned up from the south, and they just squeezed them in there and they cut them. But it put back all those operations from Nijmegen. And also put back the operations across the Rhine, but it didn't have a lot of effect really. They got no fuel, and the minute that the skies opened, because they attacked just before Christmas, it was very bad weather, and the minute that the sun came out, then they were pasted by the Air Force, so it didn't make a lot of difference. Just delayed it a week or two, I would think. But did you know that, or do you know that if you are a practicing railwayman, that your name will be on the list to go to war if actually you're required? I know we're not worried about it, but yeah. Oh yeah, you'll be on the.
I'm not sure where we'd find the kit now, Dave.
Hey?
I'm not sure where we'd get the kit from now. So.
Well, all the young ones would be. Yeah. The young ones. That exposed me, and
Any questions on
No.
Okay, Andy, could you give the vote of thanks, please?
I will do, yes. So thank you very much, Dave. What a fascinating talk. And again, there's a lot more. The military history tends to talk a lot about the fighting and all the sort of frontline activity. But of course, the soldier's no good without ammunition and fuel for his vehicles and his new boots, etc., etc. And it really is enlightening to look at how the British Army and the Canadians and the Americans worked together to actually achieve this great success, and really made the whole operation of invading Europe a practical proposition. So thank you very much for coming down. I'm aware that you need to get away and get your train in a minute. So thank you very much coming down, Dave, and giving that most excellent talk. And I'd like everyone to join me in showing our appreciation in the normal way. Lots of clapping. There we go.
And of course, it's still under. I'm still researching this, so you know.
Yeah, we'll expect volume 2 in due course. Yeah. So
Give me a week or two.
okay.
Right, thank you, Andy. Right, our final meeting of the year will be Monday, the 8th of December, and it's Gary keynote on discontinuous electrification.
Okay.
That's next month, is it?
Next month, yes.
I've got a charge. Do you mind?
You carry on, Dave, that's fine.
Been good to meet you all, hasn't it?
Yeah, you too.
Yeah, thank you, Dave.
Right, you come back in and see it now. Yes.
Very much.
My apologies on that.
Thanks very much. You'll just put the thing off at the.
Yeah, just drop it off at the desk.
Yeah, it was a civil engineering training. My first site experience was with bloke called R.S.E. Carter, Bob Carter.
Oh, yeah.
And he'd been in the Royal Engineers. Hell of a bloke.